If I told you that behind a polite invitation lies the darkest chapter of humanity?
And what if, in the middle of everyday life, a moment of unimaginable horror unfolded unnoticed?
How does cruelty hide behind civilization?
And how do ordinary people adapt to the unthinkable?
Today, we step into Tadeusz Borowski's world and ask, could we survive our own reflection?
The body adventurers?
Welcome to Human Bubble Podcast, where Plato shares snacks with the weekend and Schopenhauer gets lost in a Spotify playlist. In our freaky studio where cats knocking things over.
We explore the chaos of being human through art, books, music, and philosophy, like a brainy fever dream with good lightnings. Strap in, it's weird, it's wise, and it's probably cheaper than therapy.
So let's begin from the title. Title's irony. Just imagine Darkster and the listeners. The mentality capable of inventing such an organized path to death. I asked in a previous episode who was this genius who discovered how efficiently more than 1 million people could disappear. And even today, the exact number remains uncertain. And then, look once more at the title itself. This way for the gods, ladies and gentlemen. Hmm. Cruelty hidden beneath politeness. Extermination wrapped in a civilized language. The irony is unbearable. That's the fact. Mm, not only the irony of history, hmm, but perhaps the irony of human nature itself. This strange attraction to evil, to power, to domination. As if distraction seduces humanity precisely because we are incomplete, fractured, imperfect beings searching for superiority over someone else. Yeah, irony in the title. Let me repeat it again. This way for the gods, ladies and gentlemen. Sounds polite, elegant.
Oh, it
So
does.
the irony, yes, it does. So the irony in the title is not even hidden, right? Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It stands in sharp contrast to the place to which people are being invited. This way for the gas, ladies and gentlemen. Polite, almost welcoming. And that is precisely what makes it so disturbing. The title becomes an antithesis, courtesy confronting extermination, kindness masking horror. It reflects what we have been discussing throughout this episode. The terrifying art of killing concealed beneath the language of order, efficiency, and civilization.
Now, see, there's one thing that from the introduction has completely stayed with me. Actually, no, it's not even a thing. It's an image. So, hear me out. Imagine you're watching a soccer game. The ball moves across the field. Somebody misses a shot, and people argue over the foul, and the game goes on, and so does the life. So, while reading Tadeusz Borowski, I came across a line from John Cott that genuinely stopped me between two throw ins in a soccer game right behind my back. 3,000 people had been put to death. Just sit with that for a second, how terrifying this sounds, even. Because I don't think it's the number that unsettles me the most. It's the throw ins, the fact that the game continues. Life moves forward, and right behind it, thousands of people are dying. When we think about Auschwitz, we usually imagine horror as something impossible to ignore, but Borowski shows us something so much more disturbing. People adapt even to this. The soccer match wasn't happening outside Auschwitz. On contrary, it was happening inside it. And I think that's the perfect place to begin the story because This way for the guests, ladies and gentlemen, is not really about the death itself. It's we already know death is waiting at the end. What Brodsky wants us to understand is something else. Does the unimaginable becomes so ordinary? And how does a human being in a concentration camp wakes up in the morning and be forced to go to work, gets food once a day, and get in a pathetic way, believe me, while living in shadows of industrialized death?
Yeah, yeah. And do you know what this is called? It's called camp mentality. Um, the prisoner adapts a new morality, different one that we have it when we live in a free world. So I think, yeah, it was a part of the idea. Give people just enough food to survive, take away their luggage, their relatives, their names, use them for as long as possible, and awaken within them the conviction that survival is the only instinct that matters. Survival down to the bone until dignity becomes a luxury and until morality becomes burden.
And this is exactly where our story begins, not inside the gas chamber, not with the speech from an SS officer, not even with the violence. It begins with waiting. Actually, the narrator, Tadeusz Borowski, is sitting at the camp barracks with the prisoners during the sweltering summer day. No new transport has arrived for several days. The camp feels strangely quiet. Now, what I'm telling you is like the scene from a camp, actually, from the story. The story links in the bio, actually, as well. So, the camp, like, the camp is so quiet, and people talk, eat, complain about the heat, and try to pass the time. And suddenly everything changes. The messenger burst into the simple announcement: a transport is coming. And immediately the atmosphere shifts. Men jump from the bunks. Orders are shouted. Prisoners rush towards the leading ramp. Everyone knows what is about to happen. Or perhaps more accurately, if I were to say, everyone except the people in the train. That's the most horrifying thing I feel I'm reading right now. The narrator joins the work details and head towards the railway platform outside the camp. What awaits them looks surprisingly ordinary, actually. A ramp, trees, gravel, and railway tracks. Then the train arrives. At first, Borowski does not show us a number. He shows us the faces, exhausted faces of prisoners, exhausted faces pressed against tiny windows. Women are crying for air. Men are begging for water. People are packed in the cattle cars after the days of travel. And the doors opened, fresh air rushed in, and for a very brief moment, many of them believes the people who came on the train, they believe they've finally arrived somewhere safe. They step out carrying suitcases, bags, family photograph, food, jewelry, blanket, everything. They believe they believe they will need to begin a new chapter of life, but we quickly realize something they do not. This is not the beginning of a future, it is the end of one. So the new arrivals asks questions: what's going to happen to us, the people who came on train? But nobody answers, actually. So it's because Borowski told us of the one of the rules of the camp was people must be deceived until the very end. And from the point onwards, process unfolds in terrifying efficiency. Families are separated, children became separated from their parents, luggage is piled into enormous heap, and trucks arrive and leave again and again, like a conveyor belt. Everything moves, everything functions, everything appears organized. And that is, strangely enough, is what makes the scene so frightening, because there's no chaos, Nessie. There's no chaos at all. There is a system, actually. And Nessie and everyone inside is already aware of their roles, what they have to do.
Yes, everyone inside already knows the role. But the question, what's going to happen to us? You know what this main character Tadeusz said? Even though
Yeah.
there is, in this particular story, there is no mentioning about that there is Tadeusz, but in other stories we know. I'm going to talk about that later. Yeah. But you know what you remember what he answered? You said that it's one of the rules of the camp.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Yeah.
said, I don't know. I don't understand Polish. So that's what he said. He was tired, he was exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
But you said very briefly about the scene and beginning of the story. I want to go with quotes.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Um, yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about technique. So the
Mm-hmm.
quote from our amazing intro on page 24, let me find it quickly.
All right.
Hmm. All of us walk around naked. The first story in this volume begins with an image that may seem similar to Dante's Inferno. 28,000 women have been stripped naked and driven out of the barracks. Now they swarm around the large yard between the blockhouses. The heat rises. The hours are endless. They are naked as worms. Only later, when the scene draws nearer, as in camera close up, is it possible to distinguish in that wriggling mass of vermin different specimens of the same species? A few in pressed uniforms, with wriggling wings and high boots, like glittering scales on the common variety, with abdomens in stripes of blue and yellow. They differ also in weight. A few are well nourished, fat, and sleek. The common types move their shriveled extremities with difficulty. Only their jaws are in constant motion. Around us sit the Greeks, their jaws working greedily like huge human insects. They munch on stale lumps of bread. Borowski describes Auschwitz like an entomologist. Yeah, that was the quote. And it's this technique, it's called behaviorism.
Okay.
So it's a literary technique rooted in American psychology, particularly the ideas of behaviorism, which focused on observable actions rather than inner emotions or thoughts. And this is precisely what Borowski does. He describes actions without commentary. He records facts. He observes routines. As you said before, he focuses on behavior in a particular situation rather than on feelings or moral judgments. There is no attempt to guide the reader emotionally, no dramatic outbursts, no sentimental reflection. What emerges is called almost clinical portrait of camp reality. And strangely enough, we can see the same detachment in the narrator himself. He watches, he reports, he survives, as if as if he were merely an observer, a visitor from the dead. Which perhaps brings
Damn.
us back to yeah, it brings us back to the title of our episode because Borowski writes like someone who has crossed the border most of us cannot even imagine. You
Yeah.
know,
Correct.
you know, in my favorite intro, we can read that after publishing in 1946, they produced a shock, as Jan Kott mentioned. Why? Because there was no martyrdom. And, I'm fully aware that I use so many quotes in my part, but I can't simply resist, I can't.
Oh, come
Yeah, and the
on.
reason is quite simple. Jan Kott expressed exactly what I wanted to say and what I want to say. And sometimes when you encounter a thought articulated with such precision and clarity, the most honest thing you can do is step aside and let it speak for itself. The truth is, I couldn't have said it better, not even close.
Nessie, like after everything we've said, there's something I've been wondering. The prisoners who have ended up working with the system, some even became capos or collaborators, I must say, like the people who become the SS members actually. Are they accountable like SS official guards? I mean, is survival at the cost still a choice? And that's what Borowski makes us face, because I think the answer lies in one of the most fascinating places in the story, a place the prisons called Canada. Canada, the nickname prisons gave to those warehouses, was filled with belongings from those who had no future, and hard truth. Working there gave prisons access to those goods, more food, and little more comfort. A better chance to survive, but it came at a price, actually. So the narrator asks, "Listen, Henry, are we good people?" I think that's the moral compromise right there. This is the most crucial line I feel of the whole story, don't you think, Nessie? They weren't they weren't SS
Yeah,
officials like they
exactly.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And what I want to say, like this question actually is, listen, are we good people? Is the moment when he struggle a lot with himself, with his thoughts, but and he's between his moral responsibility according to morality he knows from the free life and how he remembers it, and between something what he came across in the concentration camp, as I said about this camp morality. So he
Mm-hmm.
asked this question, and this question is very crucial to the story because it means like that he's on the right side, probably
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
didn't accept the camp morality for sure.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And they weren't SS officials by choice, actually, but they're still caught inside a system where surviving means benefiting from others' suffering, or rather by somebody else's death, even. So, Nessie, that my question to you is: are they accountable? Maybe not in a way SS guards were, but Borowski makes sure we don't get easy answers. And maybe that's the point. In the worlds that twisted everything, even good became complicated.
That's true. I don't know that I can answer for that. I will try to. Maybe I will share with you and listeners my point of view of
Yeah,
the
please.
narrator, and yeah. And yes, before we move on, actually, one more thing about Tadeusz Borowski, who stands at the very center of these scam stories. You know that the world once called him a dazzling new talent, and rightly so.
Oh,
His
really?
prose remains one of the most unsettling literary testimonies of the 20th century. So you said about that, like you said that Tadeusz is the main character and narrator. Yes, actually, it's quite obvious, and because it's Borowski's alter ego, it's not a perfect self-portrait, but a literary reflection of a man forced to observe the collapse of humanity from within. And you said about this Canada, it was a special commando, special group of prisoners that they were responsible for transport with
Mm-hmm.
SS-man soldiers as well. Yeah. And okay, now let me tell you something about how strangely fortunate Borowski was after being arrested by the Gestapo. I have a quote on a piece of card. It was so amazing that I was put it wrote it down in a sheet of paper, even, and I stick to my board in my
Oh, for
room.
sure. Yeah, you have to be ready.
Yeah. Yeah, but the reason was different as well. I really like it. It's about fate, it's about destiny,
Mm-hmm.
about something
Mm-hmm.
what we don't know. So the
Yeah.
quote is at the end of the April 1943, Borowski was sent with a transport of prisoners to Auschwitz. On his arm, they tattooed the camp serial number 119198. His fiancée was brought to the camp in another transport. They were both lucky. 3 weeks
Really?
earlier, yeah, 3 weeks earlier, Aryans had stopped being sent to the gas chamber, except for special cases. From then only, Jews were gassed en masse. So, what a coincidence! What a coincidence! And Yancott, in introduction to the English edition, claims who is the narrator and the main character. And he says it's Vorarbeiter Tadeusz, who was assigned a double part, executioner and a victim. Well, few words
Wow.
more about the narration, and I will go with the quotes. Let me find it. It's page 21, 22.
Yes, please go
20,
ahead.
my PDF. Oh, here. Okay. Borowski's Auschwitz stories are written in the first person. The narrator of three of the stories is a deputy capo, Vorarbeiter Tadeusz. This identification of the author with the narrator was the moral decision of a prisoner who had lived through Auschwitz, an acceptance of mutual responsibility, mutual participation, and mutual guilt for the concentration camp. It is impossible to write about Auschwitz impersonally. Borowski wrote it in a review of one of the hagiographic books about the camp. The first duty of Auschwitzers is to make clear just what a camp is. But let them not forget that the reader will unwillingly ask, but how did it happen that you survived? Tell them how you bought places in the hospital, easy posts, how you shoved the Muslims into the oven, how you bought women, men, what you did in the barracks, unloading the transports at the gypsy camp. Tell about the daily life of the camp, about the hierarchy of fear, about the loneliness of every man. But write that you were the ones who did this, that a portion of the sad fame of Auschwitz belongs to you as well. Yep. So, and I have to explain the word Muslims. Uh, it's not
Mm.
the same what we think about it now. It's there's no connection with religion. Uh, you know, Muslims there were prisoners who had lost the will to live, and they had this move
Oh,
from what?
I see. I see.
Oh yeah, okay, sorry. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's just clarification for listeners and those people who read the story or are going to read the story.
Mm-hmm.
It is special
Sure.
in the hierarchy of the camp. They were on the last position. They were in the first place when there was a selection to the gas chamber. They were on the first place because they were totally exhausted. They looked haggard, so that's why it's kind of we talk about this hierarchy. So they were on this ladder. They were on the bottom.
Just how tragic is that? You make somebody work so hard and you don't give them food, and when they are exhausted and everything, you feel like they're not serving a purpose, and that's it. That's the end of them.
And that was the aim. That was the aim. As Borowski repeated that, just that is the actually goal of concentration camp.
To make them work until they are not able to work
Yeah,
and just
productive
um,
till they productive, and after the end is just that, and it doesn't have to be the death in a gas chamber, but at least it is. It is.
yeah, sadly. Anyway, so I think that is exactly why the story continues to disturb readers for decades later. Because Borowski doesn't allow us to comfort a simple category victim, executioner, hero, villain. In Auschwitz, those boundaries begin to blur, and maybe that's what makes this story so difficult to forget, even for me personally. When I read it, it was so hard for me to get it out of my mind, and even now it's not, because it refuses to let us believe that evil always arrive wearing a recognizable face. Instead, Borowski shows us ordinary people trying to survive inside an extraordinary nightmare. And before we end, Nessie, I want to leave our listeners with an unsettling question. Maybe Borowski's warning isn't about Auschwitz alone. Maybe it's about the how easily human beings can learn to live beside things they once believed were impossible. And that's true, I think. Then perhaps the most unsettling question isn't what happens there actually. It's what it's actually what any of us might become if we were forced to survive inside the world like that. I want you guys to read this question once again and do share your comments about this thing. What you think, what you would do if you were in the place of those people, and do you think they were accountable or not? Do share your comments.
Hey, do you remember that this SS man once said, uh, "There's only one exit from the camp. It's through the chimney."
Through the
Yeah,
chimney.
through the
and
chimney.
and I also when I heard some documentaries, there was this woman, I read her documentary, like she told, like, her, there was a lot of like barbed wires around the concentration camp to keep the prisoners inside, and those who were done with their lives, they could just run towards that barbed wire. It was electrocuted actually, and they would die from electricity.
Yeah, they choose that sometimes. But those who survived, they've got a very strong will.
Hmm.
And yeah, we can talk on, but we have one more thing to you. Because we would love to invite one of you to our next episode. So, if you would like to become a hearable part of our bubble, leave a comment sharing your impressions after reading the story and tell
Hmm.
us what disturbed you, what moved you, what questions remained unanswered. And we will be reading every comment carefully, and one of you may receive an invitation to join us in our studio. So step into our bubble, this time not only as a listener, but as a voice. It's not that we don't want to talk to each other, right, Darkster? It's not like that.
Yeah, but we'd like to have somebody interesting, somebody who feel connected towards it and who
Yeah,
shares their opinion about those things.
trying to improve, so stay tuned.